Let's edit this first. Hi, everybody. And it is my great pleasure and honor to welcome Master Astrologer Pam Gregory, and dear friend, but she is truly a master, particularly in the area that we're going to be talking about today, which is the nodes of the moon. And Pam has written a book all about this. It's called How to Co-Create Using the Secret Language of the Universe. I highly recommend it. I've got 2 copies. I've got one for one place and one for another. It's really, really good. And every time I read it, I get something new from it, Pam. So it's a really deep book, and I recommend it very, very highly. Pam has also got a video tutorial as well about the subject, which I highly recommend. And Pam also has another book called You Don't Believe in Astrology, Do You? Which I also think is a terrific, groundbreaking book. And she's also got many other tutorials that she offers on her website, which is thenextstep.uk.com. So without further ado, dear Pam, I'd like to ask you maybe if you could just explain to us a little bit what the nodes are, just take some of the mystery out of this and perhaps make it nice and clear for people.
Yeah, fantastic. And it may be worth saying as well, because I know so many people loved you channeling the Palladians last time. This is just going to be 2 humble humans. with no Palladians, it's just humans this time, no Palladians. So yes, I really became fascinated by the nodes about 3 years ago, because as many of you may know, in Indian astrology, they are the most important thing in the whole chart. Whereas in Western astrology, they had been, very little attention had been given to them. And certainly when I was learning astrology, and for many years, decades even through working with astrology, I just ignored them. I just ignored them. I didn't know what to do with them. And it's only really been in the last 10 years or so that I've started to dig deep, and boy, did they take me on a journey. It was just extraordinary, particularly when I was writing the book in 2017. They took me on a very profound journey. So let me explain the astronomy, and then we'll go into the astrology. So the nodes are not planets, they're not comets, they're not meteorites, they are simply points in space. And they are created by the orbit of the moon. And the orbit of the moon has a slight bobbing action. Do you remember those old-fashioned sewing machines? I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember. There was an old-fashioned sewing machine, a Singer sewing machine, and it had a bobbing, weaving action. And this is really what the moon does. The moon keeps bobbing up and down, cutting the ecliptic going north once a month, cutting the ecliptic going south. And the ecliptic is the Earth's path around the sun. So the moon's orbit is intersecting with the Earth's orbit around the sun twice a month. And when the moon cuts the ecliptic going north, that's the north node. And when it goes south, that's the south node. But for everybody, it is an axis. Because lots of people often say, well, you know, I can't see the south node in my chart. It is always, always, always exactly opposite your north node. So the north node looks like a little kind of pair of headphones. And let's say that's at 2 of Cancer. Your south node is at 2 of Capricorn. You know, if it's at 15 of Virgo, your south node is at 15 of Pisces. Always, 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 always. It's an axis. Think of it very much as an axis, not just thinking of the north node as a point, but they are simply points in space. And astronomically, the cutting of the ecliptic, if you like, by the moon's movement creates a kind of electromagnetic disturbance. And the word node actually means knot originally, K-N-O-T. It's a knot of energy. And you might think, well, what on how's that going to have any effect? But it really is profound. And the deeper I've gone into this, the more it's really opened up my life. And I am scraping the surface. I mean, Bracha was extremely kind saying I'm an expert. I think I've still got L plates on with this. I think there's so much more to the nodes than I've discovered. I honestly do, and I'm sure there are people, certainly Indian astrologers, way ahead of me. So, okay, so the moon always moves, the nodes always move through the signs retrograde. Planets, as you know, generally move direct. Occasionally they go retrograde. You'll be very familiar with Mercury retrograde. With the nodes, they are moving backwards through the signs. And they take 18.6 years to move all the way back, to do a whole circuit of the zodiac, 18.6 years. So what's very important about this, I mean, the North Node is also referred to as the dragon's head and the South Node as the dragon's tail. In Indian astrology, they're referred to as Rahu and Ketu, but essentially they mean the same thing. And when I was starting to get interested in them, to me, they really started to answer the question of, why am I here? And I think everybody at some point in their life asked the question, why am I here? What's my purpose? What's my divine mission? Kind of, who am I? And for me now, the nodes, your nodal axis, answers that question more specifically, but also more profoundly than any other part of the chart. It's just, so when I was working on the book, and the deeper I went, I was sort of disappearing down rabbit holes with this. And I started to see the chart no longer as circular, but almost in a teardrop shape. So the North Node became the pointy bit, you know, your compass needle, and everything else in the chart became the cavalry supporting that North Node, because the North Node is your soul's path of growth in this lifetime. Now, the South Node in Indian astrology represents the skills, the gifts, the abilities that we've developed over lifetimes that we bring in with us. So it's very familiar, very comfortable. The North Node by sign and by house in your chart is where you're headed. But as humans, our instinct is to go to what's familiar, to go to what's comfortable. We've done all that, you know, it's so easy to fall back on our South Node by sign and by house. But if we do that, we won't necessarily be growing very much in this lifetime. So we have to head towards our compass needle, our North Node. And that may feel very uncomfortable because it's virgin territory. It's new stuff that we've got to develop. And it's kind of like, eek, you know, I don't know how to do this. It's so much easier back on my South Node. But that's what we have to do in order to feel satisfied and fulfilled in life. And the more we grow towards that North Node, the more we'll develop a sense of momentum, purpose, satisfaction in our lives. So that's why it's so important. And I think another thing to say is, you know, we'll talk about this at the end, Bracha, but for many astrologers, they say, you've got to let the past go. You know, the South, you just let it go. That's the part, you've done it to death, let it go. For me, I came to a different conclusion, really, and each to their own. But for me, why would you waste all those abilities and gifts, all that wisdom that you've accumulated? So for me, this nodal axis almost weaves an infinity symbol. It weaves an infinity symbol, bringing the wisdom of the past, your skills, your abilities into a new future you. But it's infinite because obviously in Indian astrology and the Hindu belief in reincarnation, this life is just one stitch in the soul's tapestry, just one tiny stitch. So, and if we start to see it in that bigger context, whoa, you know, even that thought, I think, takes you on a bigger journey. So head towards that compass needle, head towards your North Node. Now, if you don't know your birth time, you still will know the sign or the signs of your North and South Node, but you won't know the houses. So you'll be able to get some of the meaning, but not all of the meaning. And Bracha very kindly mentioned my book, How to Co-Create Using the Secret Language of the Universe. And this is really a workbook. I started to write this really as a kind of philosophical book, But I kept thinking, gosh, it would be so helpful for people if they could actually use it as a workbook. So that's what it is. It's incredibly practical. So you work with your own birth chart that you can download from Bracha's website, my website, pamgregory.com, and start to work with your nodal axis, the ruler of your nodal axis, your midheaven, various parts, important parts of your chart, to weave a sense of this tapestry for this lifetime. And you know, it's been really wonderful, because with the nodes, I think another important thing to say is the nodes, although they're incredibly important, aren't the loud bits of your chart. You know, if you look at where your Mars is, if like me, you've got your Mars in Aries, you know, and got to be on a bike and on the go, and, you know, warrior energy, and, you know, that's very obvious. It's kind of in your face. You can't miss that. This is your soul's essence. This operates at a much more subtle, deeper level. So often it's hard to articulate, but when, say, in a client session, and Bracha, I'm sure you do this all the time as well, in a client session, when you describe the nodes, the nodal axis for that person, there's a deep sense of resonance that they say, God, I just wouldn't have been able to articulate that, but now you say it, you know, that really hits home. So it's really lived at the soul level, and so it's quite a different dimension to the chart, if you like. Just to say as well, if you have a sort of slightly odd situation in your chart where, let's say, your north node is in the 10th house, but it's in Cancer, and your south node, and that's the 4th sign, but your south node is in the 4th house in Capricorn, but that's the 10th sign, that feels very contradictory. The sign seems to be more important in the house, more important than the house at these times. So that's just as a bit of guidance for you. So, okay, so having written the book, people said, okay, but I want to take that further. I want to go another step with this, because I've learned a lot about my own nodal axis and how that fits with my midheaven and the rulers and da-da-da, but I want to go another step. So what I then did, and I love doing this as well, I've filmed a video companion series, and Bracha has kindly said she'll put the links below for the book and the video companion series, which runs for a very concentrated Mercury in Aries, very concentrated 75 minutes of teaching. And what it talks about, the 3 kind of pieces to the video. One piece, because you've understood your nodal, your nodal axis from the book, and if you've got it in what sign and what house, it helps you understand that. The first part of the video companion series, explains if you have planets in aspect to your nodal axis. And what I found is, and Bracha, I'd be interesting to hear what you say on this, but I found that the orb is quite wide. It can be up to about 10 degrees for a conjunction. And normally I'd never, ever, I'd use 6, maybe 7 for the sun and moon, maybe 8, that max. But for the nodal axis, I found that conjunctions within 10 degrees are operational. So it's mainly looking at conjunctions at either end of that axis and what those planets mean for you. So rather than repeating all of that, that's the first part of the video teaching. Then the next part is looking at the transits of the nodal axis, the transiting nodal axis to planets in your chart. And then the third part is transiting planets to your nodal axis. Okay, so you've got to understand your chart a little bit with this, but that again can take you on some very deep journeys, and I'll come to that in a moment and explain a little more about the video companion series. But just backing up a little bit, I want to talk about some of the themes of the nodal axis itself. The first theme is my soul's purpose. Why am I here? Big, big, big to answer that question. So understanding your own natal nodal axis. Another big theme for the nodal axis, because it's created by the moon's orbit, is your relationship with your mother. Now, you've got to know a little bit about your chart here, but the moon in astrology represents the mother. And if you want to get some information, you know, I'm doing this in preparing for a client. I'm thinking, what was the relationship with the mother? I will look at the moon by sign and particularly by the aspects to the moon. But I will also look at the aspect to that nodal axis, because that will give me more information about the relationship with the mother. You know, do you have in your chart Chiron square the nodal axis? Was your mother wounded or wounding? Do you have Pluto square the nodal axis? Was she very strong or controlling or manipulative? And, you know, as we know, astrology is a language of mathematical probability. So these are merely energy suggestions, but they will give you some very good questions for that client that can really help the client to sort of see things in a different context very much. So that's the second big area, I think, with the nodal axis, the relationship with the mother. Major theme, next theme, major is relationships. Because one of the wonderful things about the nodal axis is that it's linked to past lives. And all of you, every single one of you listening to this will have not only had many past lives, but be in relationship with people who are connected to those past lives. Bet your bottom dollar, your partner, your husband, your wife, your children, your parents, your diddly-dear, your close friends will all be connected with you in your kind of soul group. And when you meet someone, even for the first time, there's a kind of, especially if it's a kind of male-female has-been romantic relationship, it's a real, wow, I've known you for 1,000 years. I have known you for 1,000 years. I know you so deeply. It's interesting, I've got a very good friend who's 9 years younger than me, a completely different person to me. He works in credit card processing. And as I say, he's 9 years younger. We are totally different people. But there's even the first time I met him, there's a sense of, boy, have I known you forever. And he feels that, even he feels that too. So, and my moon in my chart at 2 degrees of Pisces is exactly conjunct his south node. South node particularly is the past life end. I think I was his mother in a past life, because I'm always organizing him and mothering him and fussing around. With my husband, it was Venus. My Venus is conjunct his south node. So my Venus is at 29 of Aries. It was conjunct his south node at 29 of Aries. So we were clearly lovers or spouses in a past life. You know, the dance goes on. And the first day we met Kelly, you know, was a very different person to me. Very different. But, you know, there's this glue of the dance goes on. So after I wrote the book, for a year or so, I ran a forum on Facebook to encourage people to look at their children, the charts of their children, the charts of their partners, the charts of their parents, charts of close friends, and see, and you've got to understand a bit of astrology to do this, and see where the links are, where your planets link to their nodal axis and where their nodal axis link to your planet. And you can only use the hard aspects. 95% of everything I do in astrology is linked to hard aspects. So conjunction, square, opposition. And of course, the opposition is just going to be at another end of the axis. So, you know, it's kind of the same message. But because we often change sex through different lifetimes, if, say, you have a son, S-O-N, not S-U-N, and his moon in his birth chart is conjunct your south node, is your son in this life, was he your mother in a previous life? And this, I'm getting goosebumpy now, but you know, the astrology will only take you, in my view, so far, and then you've got to talk to the Palladians or meditate or ask questions of your doing, but it will only take you so far because, you know the moon is the mother, you know, Venus is to do with love, Mercury is siblings or friends, Saturn is the father figure. So those symbols can take you so far, and then you've got to explore, you know, with the kind help of Bracha in a session, Palladian, you know, insight or whatever. But this you know, people started to develop a matrix of their family. And what, you know, if their son, who was 4 or 5 years old, had always been an incredibly nurturing child to you as the mother, is that because he was your mother? You know, you have a daughter who was always quite authoritative from a young age. Was she your father? You know, whoa, this can bring a whole other dimension into relationships, and people loved it. It's really fun to do, actually, apart from anything else, really fun. But you know, you can see where this starts to take you into a much, much, much bigger context of a very big introspective journey. Okay, I am going to let Bracha speak in a minute, but anyway, let me just finish this up. So with the videos, as I say, I look at natal planets, hard aspects to your nodal axis, what that means. The next section, looking at your transiting nodal axis to your natal nodal axis. Now that in itself is really worth doing in your life. Okay, because we know now this is an 18.6 year cycle. Just track back, because every 18.6 years, you will have a nodal, what's called a nodal return. The transiting nodal axis comes back to your natal position in your birth chart. Fabulous. You have a sense of mission, purpose. I'm on the right track. I know what I'm doing is right for me. Wonderful. Then kind of half of that 18.6. So if you add 9.3, so, you know, the first 18.6 years of everybody's life, when you get to that 18.6 point in your life for everybody, that will be your first nodal return. 37, it will be your second nodal return. You know, you can do the arithmetic very simply. The inverse nodal return is when the transiting nodal axis comes to your south node. And you just add 9.3 years to the 18.6. It's a very reliable cycle, but I give you the actual ages in the video. I can't remember them offhand, but you know, it's simple arithmetic and it's very easy for you to do. But I actually give you the ages. So look at when those inverse nodal returns happen, because that is a real sense of ending, completion, release. It's almost like it's the Fool in the Tarot for me. It's stepping off a cliff edge and completely leaving the past behind, often releasing a lot of old past life material coming up in an extraordinary way, and you've just got to let the whole lot go. So it's often a massive change of episode, of ending and beginning. Then when the transiting nodal axis comes to square your natal nodal axis, that's known as the nodal square. It's not surprising. So that's when you have a sense of, I'm at a crossroads. My life is currently hollow. It's empty. There's nothing more for my soul's growth. In this particular set of circumstances, I felt like this very much at the end of my marriage. You know, it was just done. And you have to pivot your circumstances in life to find more soul growth. Now, even if you just use those points through your life, and as I say, I give the ages in the video, this can be what came to me when I was thinking about this today, it's almost like a soul scaffolding. A soul scaffolding for your life. Because if you look back at those times in your life and say, what was happening for me at a soul level, at a very deep place, at those times in life, and what did I do? What changes did I make in response to that soul's cry for growth? Then the next section, as I said, is about the transiting nodal axis to planets in your birth chart. And then the final piece, and actually that can bring up a lot of past life material for you as well, particularly the transiting nodal axis coming onto planets like Neptune and Pluto. That was absolutely extraordinary for me, because that was happening when I was writing the book. And I just had about a year of revelations, awakenings, releasings, let the past go. It was a mystical whitewater rafting ride. It was really, really wonderful. So knowing when it's coming up for you alerts you to watch out for these times. And when I said that things like the nodal return happen at 18.6 years, the inverse return happens 9.3 years past those times, you feel them over a period of a whole year, kind of 6 months before, 6 months after. It's deep. It isn't just, for that month, because it's only exact really for a month, or even slightly less than a month, about half a month. You feel it spread over a whole year. You feel it coming down the track. And then the final piece of the teaching video is about the transiting planets coming onto that natal nodal axis. And again, both sections of those, the second section, the third section that I'm talking about there, big for relationships. If you have transiting Uranus coming onto your nodal axis, either end or square, and you're single, you can meet somebody younger, foreign, bohemian, and just go. He's a young Italian. He can take you on a wild ride. He turns up out of the blue on a motorbike, and you've got to go with it because it will awaken you emotionally. It's a wild ride. If you are in a relationship and you have transiting Uranus coming up to that nodal axis, be very aware to give your partner freedom. Lots and lots of freedom, because if you don't, very classically, this represents a breakup coming from you or coming from him, but very often there's a third person involved in this relationship. Over and over and over again, I've seen this third person, either from his side or your side. Say transiting Neptune is coming onto your natal nodal axis. If you're not in a relationship, fabulous. This is going to be the night on the white charger, red roses, champagne, perfect, romantic, best man ever. But as we know with Neptune, he can fall from the pedestal, he can turn out to be a victim, and you end up as the rescuer. If you are in a relationship and transiting Neptune comes up to that nodal axis by conjunction, square, opposition, be very clear in everything, because sometimes Neptune means things aren't as they seem, or he doesn't want you, or she doesn't want you to fully know the truth. This is deception at its worst. And again, could be a third person, could be deception with money, depending on where your nodal axis falls in your chart. Transiting Pluto coming out. If you're single, this can hit you like a sack of coal, because it's compulsive, it's irresistible, it's sexual, it's karmic, whatever happens, you've got to go with that relationship, because the energy is so strong, and that will take you into deep spiritual transformation. It will not necessarily be comfortable, but it will help you both to grow. If you're in a relationship and you've got transiting Pluto coming up to that nodal axis, then that can be really the ending. Pluto's endings and beginnings, isn't it? So anyway, this is all the stuff I go into as well. The other, I think, just two more things to say, and then I will let Bracha speak, because I'm stopped yet.
Fine, please. Sorry, when you're live, you can't.
So the other meaning of the nodal axis, and this is particularly when it's transiting, is meetings, news, you coming into higher profile, groups, associations, that kind of thing. When it transits the angles of your chart, you can suddenly come into the news, or there's an important meeting, either a business meeting or romantic meeting. It can be that you're meeting when it's on the horizontal ascendant axis. It can be that you're meeting either a single person or group of people who are very important for you. If it's coming onto your Pluto, your natal Pluto, or transiting Pluto's coming onto the nodal axis, it can be that you meet a person or group of people who are very life significant for you. They become part of your thinking. They become a teacher, a mentor. It could be Brahma Kumarist, that philosophy that you start to follow. It can be something like that, normally very spiritual. And really the final thing to say is, very important to look at the houses where Gemini and Sagittarius fall. And I know Bracha's done a whole video or live stream on, the natal, the transiting nodal axis has now moved into Gemini and Sagittarius. I've done one as well, and Bracha's going to be kind enough to put my link below as well. So rather than going through all the meanings of that, notice where Gemini and Sagittarius fall in your chart, because not only are they activating those houses, but what's very important as well is the eclipses can only happen within 18 degrees of that transiting nodal axis. So it isn't just the nodes are there for 18.6 months, it is also that the eclipses are going to be falling there. So that will activate and energize those particular houses. And you know, I said earlier with the South Node, natally, I don't think it's necessarily a letting go of everything you've learned in past lives. I think there's a weaving. Whereas with the transiting South Node, I think there is a sense of having to surrender something. It's a greater sense of having to release, let go, and focus more on that, where that transiting North Node is in Gemini. So, that's really what I wanted to say to set it all up. And I know people have sent you questions, Bracha, and you know, I'm sure you've got your view on all of this as well. But I just kind of, because there were so many questions that seemed to be repetitive or random, I thought if I got all that out, then that would kind of knock out a lot of the questions. You know, I hope it has anyway. I hope it's covered some of those.
Thank you, Pam. Yes, it was extremely comprehensive, and I really think you've covered really 90% of the questions that came in, because many of them were overlapping. So thank you. That was really all-encompassing, very enlightening. And for those of you that really want to take this deeper, I highly recommend getting Pam's book and tutorials, really, to be able to make it personal to your chart. Yeah, because the nodes are really important points. And whenever I'm looking at a chart, for example, I always look at the nodes when anybody asks me about career direction, destiny, these kinds of things. Of course, I look at the midheaven, but also very much looking at the nodes. So thank you. That was...
And it's interesting, isn't it, that I don't know how you feel, Bracha. I mean, I kind of feel that the midheaven is more something that's kind of overt in your career or your work.
Yes.
And you know, to me, it's almost that the nodal axis, the North Node, doesn't have to be your work. It often ends up that way, but it's almost like you've got to express those qualities.
Yes, and it's much more subtle.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to really dig for it. And always when I'm talking with clients, I'm usually saying, well, you might not feel this yet, or you might not know this yet, or this might be something you'd like to explore, because often that North Node can be uncomfortable, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, and like you, I don't know when you sort of started to notice the nodes. As I say, it's been relatively recent for me, considering how many years I just ignored them. I didn't know what to do with them because it was never taught. But now I really think they're important. And as I say, even these quick few days even of exactitude of nodes across the angles of the chart can be quite significant in terms of news coming. You know, you're waiting for a job offer, or you're waiting to sell your house or something, and it can act as a trigger point. Have you found that too?
Yes, very much so. It's like, oh, suddenly you've got a buyer for a house that's been stuck for a long time. Or yes, I've seen that a lot of times. Yeah.
So it's very interesting, and it seems that, you know, with that transiting nodal axis, it's just turning our attention to another area of life that needs to be developed.
Yes.
Isn't it? That, you know, and because the eclipses are there as well, that's going to become quite an area of focus. Whatever else is happening in the chart as well, it's going to be quite an area of focus for people.
Yes.
And I don't know how you feel, because the eclipses are so obviously interlinked with the nodal axis that they've got to be within 18 degrees. For me, the solar eclipses are very often easier to deal with than the lunar eclipses. Do you find that too?
Much, yes. Lunar eclipses can be very disruptive. Can be very, sometimes you have to make huge changes at a time if a lunar eclipse is hitting an angle of the chart or one of your significant planets. This can really bring something out that you maybe haven't wanted to look at for a long time. You've kind of known, and then this eclipse comes along. It's like, oh, okay, now I really do need to go ahead with this divorce, or now I really need to go ahead with this court case, and get justice for my child or whatever it is. It's like, it's often a life-changing time. Yeah, is that what you found too, Pam?
Yeah, absolutely. And they're like jumps. They're not gradual, they're not linear. It's like a jump of,
Yes.
of events, or a jump. You know, the solar eclipse I found can be quite a jump of opportunities. You know, somebody can promote your work, or, you know, something just happens out of the blue and it's very positive as a new beginning. Whereas the lunar eclipse, it can also be a jump, but you know, often there's that release of I've just got to let something get, you know, it's end of the line. I remember when I was going through this big inverse nodal return, I was struggling, and I've written about this quite a lot on social media. I had a very small property in Cathar, France, southwest France, that had, I could talk for days. I mean, just a long string of challenges and problems, and Bracha, I think that, you know, you came down and spent a week with me. You'll never forget that week. But there were a lot of challenges, let's just say. And when the inverse nodal return happened for me, and I had my south node in the 9th house of foreign places and legalities and all of that. And Pluto is very close to that natally as well. So all of that transpired into incredible insights into not just that past life in Cathar, France, but other past lives. And eventually I was able to, through the help of a very good friend, Sandy Humby, I was able to release all of that challenge. But it was like a previous life leaking through into this life that needed to be released, not only for my present life, and also for my past life, but for all the other souls that were trapped in that situation with me from that past life. So it was goosebumps. So it was a huge kind of clearing of karma for the earth, thanks to my good friend Sandy Humby, and for me as well. So that's how, you know, and again, I can talk for days about that, but that's how profound they can be.
Yes. Yes.
Deep stuff. And I discovered who I was, what my name was, what my role was, what happened, how I happened to be on that particular patch of land exactly, because it felt like home, because it was home, because it had been home. You know, whoa, it's funny at the beginning, Bracha, you said, you know, I hope you'll clear away some of the mystery around the nodes. I think actually you just keep diving into it. The more I work with them, I just keep going deeper and deeper into the node. It gets more and more mysterious, if anything. So although the astronomy is clearer, the effect of the nodes, I think, is just infinite. You never, it's like layers of an onion. You never get to the end of it. You just keep on digging.
Yes, yes, yes. A few people have asked, Pam, what's the difference between the true node and the mean node?
Okay, it's tiny, actually. It's really, really minute. But the true node is literally the point at which the moon in its orbit cuts the ecliptic. And the mean node is like the mean in arithmetic. You know, it takes an average sort of thing. It takes the midpoint, and they are ever so close, really. So I use the mean node, and I don't know what percentage of astrologers use either. I mean, for me, I use the mean node. And what do you use, Bracha?
I use the same, yeah.
Okay, so I think most astrologers tend to use that, but I don't know what Vedic astrologers use. You know, because I'm a Western astrologer, as you are, not a Vedic, I don't really know, but it is quite a small difference in time and in minutes.
Yes. Yes, I mean, certainly the things that you've shared today are profound, you know, especially I was thinking about my situation. Chiron is square to my south node. And so very much I have a wounded mother who came out of Nazi Austria. So very wounded, that Chiron square. So my speaker's not working.
That's okay.
Right, just let's stop for a minute. I'm going to. And really, Pam, I honestly think you've just said it beautifully there. So I want to thank you very, very much for your time today. I hope you've enjoyed being with us today. And I really, give you a taster here. I'm going to strongly recommend that if you want more information,